Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the conference. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging and any other Indigenous person in this room as well. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. At the end of today, we're going to have to clear this section of the room. You can, of course, stand down that section down there, but they need to flip this room for the gala dinner. So if you could help out in that exercise, that would be wonderful. Thank you for that. Today we'll start with the launch of Placebased approach to net zero. We'll then be running concurrent sessions across the plenary room and the Park View room for the remainder of the day. You'll find the Park View room on the other side. If you've been to the senior alley room, it's next door to that. So just go a bit further on and you will find it. All sessions are being recorded, so you'll be able to view the alternative options post-conference. And tonight, of course, we have the Gala Awards, advancing leadership and sustainability by celebrating best practice across the Australia and New Zealand infrastructure sectors. Thanks again to our conference platinum partner, Transport for New South Wales. Events like this obviously couldn't happen without that sort of support. And I also want to mention our gold partners, BlueScope, Lang O'Rourke, John Holland Group, GHD, and the opportunity to thank also the live stream digital partner, Autodesk. Science is telling us that to limit global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius this century, we must have emissions by 2030 or lower than by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050 and become climate positive in the latter half of the century. Many businesses aim to become net zero independently, but is this the right way to tackle such an immense challenge? No business can achieve the challenge alone. A new shared approach is Placebased, offering the potential to reach net zero at scale and at pace. If it can overcome the systemic problems that the barriers are facing us, then we should be able to reach that. This paper will discuss how global issues need local solutions. Now, there will also be a panel session later this morning at 10 o'clock. So if you do go to a session in the other room and you want to come back for the panel session, please do that. I want to thank Mott McDonald for their partnership on this paper as they're sponsoring this session. Mott McDonald is a global engineering management and development organisation whose purpose is to improve society by considering the social outcomes in all we do, relentlessly focusing on excellence and digital innovation, transforming their clients' businesses, our communities and employee opportunities. I'd like to introduce you to Amanda Sturgeon, is the head of regenerative design at Mott McDonald and is based in Sydney. As a former CEO of International Living Future Institute, she spent a decade creating regenerative frameworks such as the Living Building and Community Challenge programs, scaled the organisation globally and created a global movement around biophilic design. Amanda is the author of today's paper. She will be joined on the stage by Patrick Hastings, who is the Chief Delivery Officer at ISC. He has a wide experience in communications, community relations, social performance, Indigenous affairs, government relations, crisis and issue management, project management, and also land access and organisational changes. Patrick is passionate about building sustainable communities and has been recognised in the resource sector for leading best practice teams and initiatives. So I'd like to invite both of those people, Patrick and Amanda, to the stage to take us through this session. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? It's lovely to be with you today. Well, I think it's quite ironic that we had to navigate extreme weather and flood warnings to get here today, given that the IPCC report that was released this week noted that 50% of the world is already living amongst the impacts of climate change. So we're seeing the world change right around us, and we know that we must act quickly to slow down and reverse some of the impacts of climate change. So at last we have mandates and commitments to reach net zero targets, but there's a big gap in the industry between the mandates and the implementation. So I wonder, with a show of hands, how many of you think we're being successful at implementing net zero into your projects right now? Can you show me your... Do we have anyone that thinks they're being successful? Not a single hand. I completely agree. We're not being successful at implementing net zero in our projects. So how do we both meet this urgent target and need to change and reach these kind of mandates and targets quickly? Well, I think the answer to that is in changing our approach to net zero and how we think about it and how we implement it. So we need to look at delivering infrastructure through different models than we have before. The problem in front of us is so large and so systemic that I don't believe we'll be able to reach net zero targets if we keep going the same way we have been doing. So the reason for that is that the task of transforming our world to net zero is simply just too complex and too challenging for a top-down, one-size-fits-all approach to our work. Last year, our UK team worked together with the Net Zero Infrastructure Industry Coalition in the UK to produce a report called The Placebased Approach to Net Zero. The report was really well received across the UK as a clear roadmap for how to bring place-based thinking into the infrastructure that makes up our cities. So the wonderful staff, and Laura in particular at ISC, approached us to see if we would adapt the report to Australia and New Zealand. And that's what we're going to release. And we have it up available on the website today for you to take a look at. Our contexts are very different to the UK, so the report's changed quite a bit to reflect that and to demonstrate local case studies where we are already implementing place-based solutions and governance models. So I'll give you a quick look and an overview of the report. We've got also a lovely video that was finished about, 10 p.m. last night, I think. And then Patrick's going to talk about actions, because I don't know about you, but I'm a bit tired of reading reports that tell me what we should be doing but don't actually outline how to act and how to actually move to do it. So this report is also about how we take action. So there's two key aspects to a place-based approach. Firstly, it acknowledges that the implementation of net zero commitments and goals will be more successful if the solutions both relate to the unique context in which they're applied and if they mobilize localized resources, actions, and engagement. There's three key benefits to a place-based approach. First, you can mobilize enthusiastic local investment and resources that you would be leaving off the table if you didn't engage from a place-based perspective. Secondly, you can accelerate community buy-in. So versus, we're going to present to the community what we've already designed and take some comments, you actually start by having a governance structure that includes community input. And you can increase the opportunity and likelihood of the success to achieve the net zero mandates and missions and commitments that we're seeing emerge. So cities and regions are a complex system of systems, right? They're composed of so many different aspects: the water systems, the energy systems, our utility systems, as well as the buildings and infrastructure. And we know that, while most of the population in Australia and New Zealand lives in an urban centre, 40% of the GDP in Australia, for example, comes from regional areas. So we need to find a place-based solution that works not just for cities, but also for our regions, which is why the context of this report is focused on both cities and regions and solutions for place-based approaches that work for both. There's four key pillars to the strategy for place-based. And first of all, we call it powers. And the powers is really about having these mandates and commitments in place. Thankfully, we now do. Some of the targets are, you could argue, maybe too far in the future, but we do have, mandates both in the private and the public sector. The second is partnerships, the kind of governance structures that we might need to bring to the table that we haven't done before, that allow us to have really in-depth partnerships across sectors and also across government layers. Thirdly, we really need transparent data and the platform to be able to both understand what net zero might look like from a community-to-community perspective, but also track what the opportunities are and what our success moments are, and so that we know if we're actually on track or not. And then fourth, we need to invest in people and skills. I suspect everyone in this room has at least a couple of job ads out looking for talented, experienced people to implement net zero and climate change on their projects. So we have a incredible skills gap, and the investment in people at a community scale allows us to unlock some of that. The report talks about this place-based governance and what that might look like. I'm not going to talk too much about this because there's a fantastic panel that Beck Dawson is moderating later, and she's essentially got this figured out already with the Resilient Sydney work she's been doing, how to create really good place-based governance that can unlock community engagement and make sure that solutions are actually relevant to each place. So this diagram really shows that this is an iterative process in which you're engaging with community and you're coming back to your governance structure, and then also engaging the layers of government as well. There are three key principles that we identified to undertake a place-based approach that are pretty essential to starting out. Firstly, co-design. The principle of co-designing is something that can make government agencies and also those that are risk averse on very large scale projects very nervous. It can take more time. It can mean that you can get a contrary range of opinions on something. You can even find conflict emerging that is hard to resolve. But if we shut out the ability to co-design with our communities and with different sectors and layers of government, I don't believe we will get to net zero targets. We also need a systems approach, and we need to understand that our cities and regions are complex systems. We cannot look at one piece of infrastructure in isolation to where it's connecting in with all those other systems. And thirdly, if we do both of those things, we can unlock innovation and support innovation. Rather than seeing innovation again as a risk or a cost increase to a project, we can actually unlock innovation that can be at the heart of the project from the beginning. So the report also contains a range of case studies from across Australia and New Zealand. I won't go into those in detail this morning, but I encourage you to look at the report and show where some of this place-based thinking has already been enacted. City Rail Link project in New Zealand has incorporated the Maori iwis to help inform their work. Watercare carbon reduction program in New Zealand has also utilized data. If you remember, the third pillar of that four-pillar strategy is about how do you unlock data to be able to build momentum in place-based solutions. Similarly, with Wellington, they've also been able to unlock a data solution to be able to assess their carbon from the beginning so they know what target they're looking at, and they then know how to benchmark and assess whether they've been successful. We're seeing some great solutions like in Parramatta Light Rail, then also thinking about how you might reduce heat island in a location that's really critical, and look at creative solutions to be able to achieve that. And then lastly, in South Australia, we're seeing the Tesla virtual power plant that's able to unlock each homeowner's ability to track their ability to use renewable energy. It's a renewable energy-based approach. And lastly, we also talk in the report the importance of Indigenous leadership for both Australia and New Zealand to lead our thinking in terms of how our infrastructure is truly connecting to culture and country. So with that, we've got a short video. Before we go to that, I just do want to do a few thank yous to a few people in the room. I was noted as the author before, but I do want to say that it was definitely not just me that authored this. The wonderful Kathy Chesham here and Chelsea Blondell were key to authoring and making this report happen, as well as many others, and the fantastic Laura at IFC and the team, and Patrick as well. So these kinds of reports are joint efforts, and it takes a village to create them. So thanks to everybody for that. All right, if we are able to cue the video.
Australia and New Zealand are committed to achieving net zero by 2050. How can city and regions play their part? Getting to net zero in Australia and New Zealand is a complex challenge. Meeting this challenge can be assisted at a regional and city level by taking a place-based systems approach. Instead of thinking about infrastructure, services or organisations in isolation, we need to consider all the systems in a city that provide people with what they need. Water, power, transport, food distribution, heating, health, education, and so on. We can then map out what needs to change in each and how changes in one system could affect others, which interventions could unlock benefits across multiple systems, and where are the blockers to change. Local and state governments can bring together a diverse range of stakeholders whose insights can give a clearer picture of the way local systems work and interact. That's why cities and regions potentially have a key role to play as we move towards net zero. They can be the systems integrator, coordinating local stakeholders, identifying local opportunities, unlocking local benefits, and mobilising local investment. So how can we help cities and regions to develop this approach? A new report by Mott MacDonald Australia and the Infrastructure Sustainability Council builds on the 4-pillar strategy, powers, partnerships, platform and people, and the place-based governance model proposed by Mott MacDonald UK and the Net Zero Infrastructure Industry Coalition. A place-based governance model can be used by cities and regions in Australia and New Zealand to achieve net zero programs. With representation from tiers of government, regulators, industry, and the professions, effective governance can set the vision, align key stakeholders, resolve complex interfaces, and enable expert facilitation among all parties. As such, place-based solutions can be achieved by adopting 3 place-based principles: co-design, systems approach, and innovation. This place-based systems approach will help cities and regions accelerate towards net zero in a way that matches Australia and New Zealand's net zero ambitions. Let's work in partnership with communities, government, business and industry to bring place-based practices to life for local livelihoods and global impact.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and also thank you to Chessie, Emily, Chelsea and Laura for what I think is an absolutely fantastic paper. I am so excited by this paper for a number of reasons, but the main one is that for the last 20 years prior to moving into this role, I've worked in the regions and remotely in Australia. And time again, every time you move into a new community, the themes are the same, but as you get below those themes, you start to see such vast difference in the way you need to tackle a problem or issue. And as we start to look at the global challenges that are approaching, or have approached, or are already here, depending on whether you look out the window or not, it really becomes absolutely essential that we start thinking more effectively around our engagement and more purposefully around understanding the challenge at a local level. If we really want to drive outcomes, then we really need to be adaptive and have the ability to understand the local challenge and address the local challenge to drive that global outcome. The cities and regions in which we live, work and play are as unique and as diverse as we are as individuals. No one is the same. While we are working towards a common global goal of positive climate action, how to deliver this complex outcome requires us to take a place-by-place approach to the needs and respond to the specific contexts, strengths and vulnerabilities of the communities in which we work. Infrastructure has a leading role in delivering climate action. As a sector, we enable up to 70% of emissions through the way we plan, design, build and use infrastructure. It is in the consideration of the user's needs and the use of our assets we have the greatest potential for impact, leveraging our influence on their lifestyles, the communities and the economies we enable. Climate action is a complex crisis that will require a systems-based solution. We will only succeed through challenging ourselves to reach beyond the constructs and silos of asset class and life cycle stages. We need to listen, hearing what our stakeholders and our communities believe they need and what will actually work. We need to rise beyond the competitive thinking and short-term goals to work in partnership and collaboration towards common purpose that extends beyond our lifetime. This is a call to action for the infrastructure sector, to lead by example, to think globally and act locally in the cities and regions in which we live, work and play. Let's work in partnership with our communities, our government, our business and our sector, and bring place-based practices to life for local livelihoods and global impact. It's time to do climate action differently. As a sector, our approach needs to be accelerated and results-driven. This is going to require a move beyond our traditional ways of working. Competition needs to shift to collaboration. Our focus needs to shift to be additive, beyond profits and productivity, to include purpose and people. We need to bring our global and local thinking together to deliver a rapid transition for our towns, cities and regions. As we welcome the decade of opportunity, we must take action. And there are three simple ways we can do that. The first one is that we need to reconnect and realign with our purpose. Infrastructure is the enabler. Infrastructure is here to serve people, communities and the environment. This must be firmly in our sights as we deliver our once-in-a-generation infrastructure pipeline. People are why we do this. Our sector needs to be supported. We need to advocate for sustainability and climate action to be a core objective of the infrastructure reform agenda. We need to create opportunities for our sector to collaborate to embed quadruple bottom line outcomes across our portfolio. And we, as the ISC, need to work with our members to leverage and improve the investment and the use of the IS rating scheme. Secondly, we need a rapid investment to build our capability. We need a bigger, better and more accessible toolbox. Climate action needs to be embedded in our systems, policies and culture so people are empowered to act. We need to make sustainability and climate change core to the objective of our digital adventure. We need to invest in our people by building their skills and capability, but more importantly, empower them to identify different opportunities and different outcomes. And finally, as a sector, we need to collaborate to develop common industry-wide tools, knowledge and systems. Thirdly, we need to bring people together. At all levels, infrastructure needs to be leading the convening and collaboration of a cross-sectorial approach to co-design solutions to deliver net zero and positive climate action. We need to be active, inclusive community members, collaborators who partner across industry to help every person and every organisation find their voice and their role in delivering a positive climate outcome and net zero places. So I call on all of you to join us, the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, as we build out member coalitions committed to bringing together infrastructure leaders to drive this approach forward. And I encourage all of you to be bold. Pilot place-based approaches across your projects in Australia and New Zealand. And let's start to think locally to act globally.